The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in over 3 centuries. Ambassador Zekthar of the Vorthak Empire shifted nervously in his crystalline chair, his 4 eyes darting between the holographic displays showing the advancing Zephyrian fleet. The numbers were staggering, and each update brought worse news. 17 systems have fallen in the past lunar cycle, announced High Counselor Velnara, her translucent blue form flickering with anxiety. The Zephyrian collective shows no signs of slowing their expansion. Our combined fleets are being systematically destroyed. Around the vast circular chamber, representatives from dozens of species murmured in their native tongues. The situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst predictions. What had started as border skirmishes with the Zephyrians had escalated into a full-scale invasion that threatened every civilized world in the galaxy. Ambassador Crix of the Mentari Federation stood, his scaled green hide reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. We have exhausted our military options. The Zephyrians adapt to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. Their biomechanical ships regenerate damage in real time, and their warriors feel no pain, no fear, no mercy. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. The Zephyrians had emerged from the galactic rim 2 years ago, a collective consciousness that consumed entire civilizations to fuel its expansion. They converted captured populations into cyborg drones, adding their knowledge and biological distinctiveness to their own. Every victory against them came at a devastating cost, and defeats meant entire species vanishing forever. Dr. Nixara, the chief xenobiologist of the Council, activated her personal hologram projector. A star map appeared, highlighting the Zephyrian advance in ominous red. But, based on current projections, they will reach the core worlds within 6 months. After that, she paused, her tentacles writhing with distress. Complete galactic assimilation is inevitable. Ambassador Zekthar had been dreading this moment, but he knew it was time to speak. The information in his possession could change everything, but it also carried risks that might doom them all. He rose slowly, his carapace clicking against the chair. "There is another option," he said, his voice barely above a whisper through the translation matrix. All eyes turned to him. High Counselor Velnara leaned forward, her ethereal form brightening with interest. "Speak, Ambassador. Any option must be considered." Zekthar activated his own display, showing a small yellow star system on the outer rim of the galaxy. This is Sol System. 3rd planet from the star, designation Terra. The inhabitants call themselves humans. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Most species represented had heard whispers of the humans, though few had any direct contact. They were considered a young, primitive species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. The humans? Counselor Velnara's tone was skeptical. "Ambassador, while I respect the diversity of galactic life, we need military solutions, not anthropological curiosities. The humans lack the technology to significantly aid our cause." Zekthar's mandibles clicked nervously. "With respect, High Counselor, you misunderstand the nature of my proposal. I am not suggesting we ask for their technological assistance." Dr. Nixara's display showed human population statistics and basic technological assessments. The humans are indeed primitive by our standards. They've barely established colonies in their own system, let alone develop the biotechnology necessary to compete with the Zephyrians. "You're still missing the point," Zekthar insisted, his voice growing stronger. "I've spent the last 15 years studying human behavior patterns, their history, their psychology. What I discovered," he paused, looking around the chamber, "what I discovered should terrify every sentient being in this room." The chamber grew quiet. Ambassador Crix leaned forward, his reptilian features creased with curiosity. "Explain." Zekthar's display changed, showing archived footage from human conflicts. Images of ancient battles, mechanized warfare, and destruction flashed across the screen. In their brief recorded history, humans have perfected the art of warfare to a degree that defies explanation. They don't just fight wars, they study them, refine them, turn them into science. "All species have conflicts," interjected Ambassador Thelvia of the Crystalline Coalition. "This proves nothing." "Not like this," Zekthar replied, his voice taking on an urgent tone. "Other species fight for resources, territory survival. Humans fight for concepts. They will die for abstract ideas like freedom, honor, or revenge. They've created weapons capable of sterilizing their own planet multiple times over, not because they needed them for survival, but because they could." The display showed more footage, nuclear explosions, chemical weapons, biological warfare. The assembled representatives watched in horrified fascination. Dr. Nixera studied the data with growing concern. These are weapons of mass extinction. Why would a species develop such things? Because they understand something the rest of us don't, Zekthar explained. Total war. Most civilized species fight until victory conditions are met or losses become unacceptable. Humans fight until their enemy is completely destroyed or they themselves are extinct. There is no middle ground in human warfare. High Counselor Velnara's form flickered more rapidly, a sign of deep disturbance. You're suggesting we unleash a species of genocidal maniacs against the Zephyrians? I'm suggesting we point the most dangerous predators in the galaxy at our common enemy, Zekthar corrected. The humans have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but there's something else about them that makes them uniquely suited for this task. He changed the display again, showing human expansion patterns and colonization efforts. Look at how they've adapted to different environments. Desert worlds, ice worlds, high radiation zones. Humans don't just survive these conditions, they thrive in them. Their adaptability is remarkable. Ambassador Crick studied the data carefully. Impressive, but the Zephyrians adapt even faster. Do they? Zekthar asked. The Zephyrians adapt through technological integration. They take what they conquer and add it to their collective. But humans adapt through pure biological and psychological flexibility. They change their tactics, their thinking, their entire approach to warfare based on the enemy they face. The display showed historical examples. Human armies adapting to fight in jungles, deserts, urban environments, even in the vacuum of space. Each conflict had produced new innovations, new strategies, new ways of killing efficiently. Doctor, Nexara's tentacles were now writhing with visible distress. Ambassador, what you're describing sounds like a species that wages war for its own sake. Not for its own sake, Zekthar corrected. For survival. But their definition of survival includes things that most species would consider luxuries: personal freedom, individual dignity, the right to determine their own destiny. They will fight wars that seem hopeless if these principles are threatened. The chamber was now completely silent. The implications of what Zekthar was suggesting were beginning to sink in. Ambassador Thelvia spoke first. Even if everything you say is true, why would humans fight the Zephyrians for us? They have no stake in this conflict. Zekthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Because the Zephyrians represent everything humans instinctively fear and hate, a collective consciousness that destroys individuality. Forced assimilation, the complete elimination of personal choice. To humans, the Zephyrians aren't just invaders. They're the ultimate enemy of everything humanity stands for. But their technology is centuries behind ours, protested Ambassador Crix. What could they possibly do against Zephyrian biomechanical ships? That's exactly why they might succeed where we have failed, Zekthar explained. The Zephyrians have adapted to fight advanced technological civilizations. Their ships are designed to counter energy weapons, defensive fields, and sophisticated targeting systems. But humans still think in terms of kinetic weapons, explosive charges, and directed nuclear fusion. The display showed human weapons technology crude by galactic standards, but devastatingly effective in its simplicity. They build weapons that don't rely on complex technology, Zekthar continued. Weapons that can't be easily adapted to or countered, and more importantly, they think like predators. They don't just want to defeat the Zephyrians, they want to hunt them. High Counselor Velnara was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Assuming we could convince them to help us, how do you propose we make contact? The humans have strict protocols about first contact with alien species. Actually, we've already made informal contact, Zekthar admitted. Nothing official, just observation posts, monitoring stations. We've been studying them for decades, preparing for the day when contact might become necessary.
You've been spying on them? Doctor...
Nexara asked, shocked. We've been studying the galaxy's most dangerous species, Zekthar replied bluntly. It seemed prudent. Ambassador Crix leaned back in his chair, his scaled features thoughtful. What did you learn from this observation? Zekthar's display showed surveillance footage from Earth cities, military installations, space facilities. We learned that humans are even more dangerous than we initially believed. They've weaponized everything. Their entertainment, their sports, even their children's games are simulations of warfare. They have military academies where they study every battle ever fought, analyzing failures and successes with obsessive detail. This is madness, whispered Ambassador Thelvia. No, Zekthar corrected. This is evolution. Humans evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill them. They competed against predators, environmental disasters, diseases, and each other for millions of years. They're the ultimate survivors because they had to be. The display showed Earth's biodiversity, the countless species that had shaped human evolution through predation and competition. Look at their physical capabilities, Zekthar continued. Humans are persistent hunters. They can literally run prey to death over vast distances. They have redundant organs, rapid healing, and pain tolerance that borders on the supernatural. But most importantly, they have pattern recognition abilities that allow them to predict and counter enemy behavior. Dr. Falk. Nixara was studying the biological data with growing amazement. These physiological traits are remarkable. The healing rate alone suggests they evolved in an environment of constant injury and recovery. Every human is essentially a warrior scholar, Zekthar explained. They study their enemies, learn from their mistakes, and adapt their tactics continuously. But unlike us, they don't just adapt their technology, they adapt their thinking. The chamber was beginning to buzz with conversation as the implications became clear. High Counselor Velnara raised her hand for silence. Ambassador Zekthar, you present a compelling case. But contacting humans would violate the Galactic Accords on pre-warp civilizations. The political ramifications alone would be staggering. The Galactic Accords won't matter if we're all assimilated by the Zephyrians, Zekthar replied grimly. And technically, humans achieved warp capability last year. They're no longer a pre-warp civilization. This news sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the chamber. Ambassador Crix's eyes widened. They achieved warp drive? Our intelligence indicated they were still decades away from that breakthrough. Our intelligence was wrong, Zekthar admitted. Humans accelerated their technological development through what they call wartime innovation. They treat technological advancement like a military campaign, organized, focused, and ruthlessly efficient. The display showed human warp-capable vessels, primitive but functional designs that worked despite violating several principles of conventional engineering. Look at their approach, Zekthar continued. Instead of perfecting the technology, they built ships that were good enough and started exploring immediately. They prioritize speed of deployment over theoretical perfection. In warfare, this gives them a significant advantage. High Counselor Velnara was clearly torn between hope and horror. Assuming we make contact, what makes you think they would agree to help us? Because humans have a psychological compulsion to protect the weak and fight bullies, Zekthar explained. They call it their moral code, though it's really an evolutionary adaptation that helped their species survive. They cannot psychologically tolerate the strong preying on the weak without intervening. Even if it means their own destruction? Asked Dr. Nixara. Especially if it means their own destruction, Zekthar replied. Humans have a concept they call going down fighting. They would rather die with honor than live as slaves. The Zephyrians represent everything humans have been evolutionarily programmed to destroy. The chamber fell silent again as the weight of the decision settled over them. Finally, Ambassador Crix spoke. What are you proposing specifically? Zekthar took a deep breath, his carapace clicking nervously. I propose we send a delegation to Earth. We explain the situation, provide them with intelligence on Zephyrian capabilities, and ask for their assistance. And if they refuse? Asked Ambassador Thelvia. They won't refuse, Zekthar said with certainty. But they'll want to examine Zephyrian technology, study their tactics, and develop countermeasures. We would need to provide them with everything we know. High Counselor Velnara considered this. That would mean sharing classified military intelligence with a species we've never formally met.
Yes, Zekthar agreed. But consider the alternative.
In 6 months, there won't be any classified intelligence because we'll all be part of the Zephyrian collective. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than expected. The decision to contact humanity passed by a margin of just 3 votes. As the chamber began to empty, many representatives looked as though they weren't sure whether they had just voted to save the galaxy or doom it. High Counselor Velnara approached Zekthar as he gathered his materials. Ambassador, I hope you understand the magnitude of what we've just authorized. If you're wrong about humans, if I'm wrong, we're already dead, Zekthar replied. But if I'm right, the Zephyrians are about to learn why humans are the most feared predators in the galaxy. As the council chamber darkened, Zekthar looked out at the stars, wondering if they had just made the wisest decision in galactic history or signed their own death warrant. In 72 hours, the first official diplomatic mission to Earth would depart. The message they carried would either forge an alliance that could save civilization or unleash a force that would make the Zephyrians seem merciful by comparison. The die was cast. Now, they would discover what happened when the galaxy's most dangerous species was given a reason to fight. The diplomatic vessel Harmony of Worlds dropped out of warp at the edge of Sol System, its crystalline hull reflecting the yellow light of Earth's star. Captain Velkin of the Mentari Federation gripped his command console with scaled hands, trying to hide his nervousness from the mixed-species crew. In his 40 years of service, he had never carried a more dangerous cargo than the 3 ambassadors now preparing for first contact with humanity. Sensors are detecting multiple artificial objects throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Zikshara from the science station. I count 17 major installations, 43 active vessels, and something else. Specify, ordered Captain Velkin. The objects appear to be weapons platforms, the young Vorthak officer said, her voice trembling slightly. They're tracking us. All of them. Ambassador Zekthar entered the bridge, having shed his formal council robes for a simpler diplomatic uniform. Behind him came Ambassador Crix and Dr. Crix. Nixara, both looking as tense as the situation warranted. Captain, have we been detected? Zekthar asked. Thoroughly, Velkin replied. Human technology may be primitive, but their surveillance network is remarkably comprehensive. We're being scanned by at least a dozen different sensor arrays. Dr. Nixara studied the tactical display with growing concern. These weapon platforms, they're positioned at strategic points throughout the system. This isn't random placement, it's a defensive grid designed to prevent escape. Escape? Ambassador Crix's reptilian features showed confusion. Why would they assume we want to escape? Because that's how predators think. Zekthar explained grimly. They've trapped us. Every possible exit route is covered. If we make any aggressive moves, we'll be destroyed before we can react. Captain Velkin's confidence was rapidly diminishing. Perhaps we should withdraw and reconsider our approach? No, Zekthar said firmly. This is exactly what I expected. Humans don't trust anything they don't understand, and they always assume the worst-case scenario. But they're also curious. They'll want to know why we're here before they decide whether to destroy us. As if summoned by his words, the ship's communication array activated. A harsh mechanical voice filled the bridge, speaking in what the translation matrix identified as English. Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. You have entered restricted space. State your identity and intentions immediately. Zekthar stepped forward, activating his translator. This is Ambassador Zekthar of the Galactic Council. We request permission to make formal diplomatic contact with the representatives of humanity. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Captain Velkin watched his tactical display with growing alarm as more human vessels began moving into intercept positions. Galactic Council? The human voice had changed, becoming more cautious but less hostile. Stand by for security protocols. Do not deviate from your current position. Security protocols? Dr. Nixara whispered. What kind of security protocols? Her answer came in the form of a massive human battleship that materialized directly ahead of them, having somehow approached without being detected. Its hull was a menacing grey-black metal covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. Lieutenant Zixara's voice was barely audible. How did they mask their approach? Our sensors should have detected them at least an hour ago. ST Thelf technology, Ambassador Crix observed with grudging respect. Crude but effective. They found a way to fool our sensors using methods we never considered. The human battleship established a communication link, and suddenly the main display showed the interior of what was obviously a military command center. The human in charge was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to look directly through the screen at them. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, Commander of Earth Defense. You claim to represent a galactic council. Provide proof of your claim and explain why we should believe you're not planning an invasion. Zekthar stepped into view of the camera, his alien appearance causing visible reactions among the human crew in the background. Admiral Chen, I understand your suspicion. In your position, I would react the same way. We come seeking your assistance against a threat that endangers all intelligent life in the galaxy. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Assume for a moment that I believe you. Why would an advanced galactic civilization need help from humanity? We've been in space for less than a century. Because sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective. Zekthar replied carefully. May I transmit data proving our identity and explaining the nature of the threat we face? Negative. You'll follow our security ship to a designated area where we can examine your vessel and verify your claims. Any deviation from the prescribed course will be interpreted as hostile action. The communication cut off abruptly. Captain Vulcan looked at his instruments in amazement. They're jamming our long-range communications. We can't contact the Council. Of course they are, Zekthar said with what might have been admiration. They've isolated us completely. If we were planning an invasion, we couldn't call for reinforcements. A smaller human vessel appeared beside them, its hull bristling with weapons that were obviously designed to disable rather than destroy. The security ship began transmitting navigation instructions. Follow that ship, Zekthar ordered. And Captain, instruct all crew members to remain calm. Humans can smell fear, and they interpret it as either weakness or guilt. The journey to the designated security area took 3 hours, during which time the diplomatic vessel was surrounded by an escort of human ships that maintained precise formations while continuously scanning them. Dr. Nixara spent the time analyzing human technology and becoming increasingly worried. Their weapons are incredibly sophisticated, she reported to the ambassadors. Not in terms of pure power, but in terms of tactical application. Each weapon system is designed for a specific purpose, and they have redundant systems for every possible scenario. What concerns you most? Ambassador Crix asked. They've designed their entire fleet around the assumption that they'll be fighting enemies with superior technology, Dr. Nixara explained. Every ship is built to exploit weaknesses in more advanced civilizations. It's as if they've been preparing for this moment their entire history. The security area turned out to be a massive space station hidden in the asteroid belt. As they approached, the true scale of human paranoia became apparent. The station was a fortress, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a planet, and it was surrounded by automated defense platforms that tracked their every movement. This is more than defensive preparation, Ambassador Crix observed. This is fortress mentality taken to its logical extreme. No, Zekthar corrected, studying the station's design. This is strategic thinking. They've built this facility specifically to deal with first contact scenarios. Everything about it is designed to give them maximum advantage while minimizing risk. The diplomatic vessel was guided into a docking bay that immediately sealed behind them. Atmospheric scanners confirmed that the bay was filled with breathable air, though the ambassadors would still need environmental suits due to the gravity and atmospheric composition differences. Fascinating, Dr. Nixara murmured, studying her instruments. They've adjusted the atmospheric mixture to accommodate multiple alien physiologies. They don't know what we breathe, but they've created an environment that should be survivable for most carbon-based life forms. Admiral Chen was waiting for them in the docking bay, accompanied by an honor guard of human soldiers whose equipment was a mixture of high-tech electronics and surprisingly primitive weapons. Zekthar noticed that every soldier carried both energy weapons and conventional firearms, as well as what appeared to be edged weapons. Redundancy, he murmured to his companions. If their advanced weapons fail, they still have backups. And backups for the backups. Admiral Chen approached them directly, showing no fear, despite facing 3 alien species for the first time in human history. Her handshake with Zekthar was firm and confident. Welcome to Checkpoint Alpha, she said formally. I hope you'll understand our caution. This is humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, and we prefer to err on the side of survival. Your caution is commendable, Zekthar replied. In your position, my people would have simply opened fire and asked questions later. We considered that option, Admiral Chen said with a slight smile. But our xenobiologists convinced me that peaceful contact might provide better intelligence than wreckage analysis. They were escorted through corridors lined with both visible and concealed weapons emplacements. Every door they passed was an airlock capable of sealing sections of the station independently. The humans had clearly designed this facility to contain any possible threat. How long have you been expecting alien contact? Dr. Nixara asked as they walked. Since we invented radio, Admiral Chen replied. We've been listening to the galaxy for over a century. We know we're not alone. We just didn't know when you'd finally show up. And you prepared for invasion rather than peaceful contact, Ambassador Crix observed. We prepared for the worst-case scenario and hoped for the best, Admiral Chen corrected. It's kept us alive so far. The conference room was a masterpiece of intimidation disguised as diplomacy. The table was positioned so that the human delegation would have their backs to a wall, while the alien visitors sat in the open center of the room. Every surface contained hidden sensors and weapon systems, and the lighting was designed to put the humans at advantage while making their guests feel exposed. Please be seated, Admiral Chen said, gesturing to chairs that had obviously been hastily constructed to accommodate alien physiologies. Before we begin, I need to establish some ground rules. This station is surrounded by enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. If you make any threatening moves, you will be vaporized instantly. Are we clear? Perfectly clear, Zekthar agreed. Though I should point out that if we were hostile, we would have brought a fleet of our own rather than a single diplomatic vessel. Maybe, Admiral Chen conceded. Or maybe your scouts for a larger force. We'll know which soon enough. She activated a holographic projector, and suddenly the room was filled with star maps showing the galaxy. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected large-scale conflicts in several sectors. Energy signatures consistent with major fleet engagements. What's happening out there? Zekthar was impressed despite himself. Your monitoring capabilities are more advanced than we realized. We've had a lot of motivation to improve them quickly, Admiral Chen replied. Now, answer the question. Ambassador Crix leaned forward, his scales reflecting the holographic light. Admiral, we face an enemy that threatens all intelligent life in the galaxy. The Zephyrian Collective has already consumed 17 civilizations and shows no signs of stopping. Collective consciousness? Admiral Chen's expression sharpened. Hive mind? Worse, Dr. Nixara replied. They assimilate other species into their collective, preserving their knowledge and abilities while eliminating their individuality. Each person they capture makes them stronger and more dangerous. The human admiral was quiet for a moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly serious. Show me. Zekthar activated his data projector, filling the room with images from Zephyrian attacks. The assembled humans watched in grim silence as entire worlds were consumed, their populations converted into cybernetic drones serving the collective. How long before they reach Earth? Admiral Chen asked bluntly. At current expansion rates, approximately 4 to 6 months, Zekthar replied. But that assumes they maintain their current approach. If they decide to accelerate, they could be here in weeks, Admiral Chen finished. And you want our help fighting them? We want to offer you a partnership, Ambassador Crix corrected. Our combined fleets have been unable to stop them. We need new strategies, new approaches, new ways of thinking about warfare. Admiral Chen stood and began pacing, her mind obviously working through the implications. What makes you think we can succeed where you failed? Because you think like they do, Zekthar said bluntly. Most civilized species fight wars to achieve specific objectives. You fight wars to completely destroy your enemies. The Zephyrians understand total warfare, so do you. You're asking us to commit genocide, Admiral Chen stated flatly. We're asking you to prevent it, Dr. Faper, Nixara replied. The Zephyrians don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They consume everything they encounter. This isn't a war for territory or resources. It's a war for the right to exist as individuals. Admiral Chen stopped pacing and looked directly at Zekthar. What do you know about human military history? Enough to know that you've never backed down from a fight when your survival was threatened, Zekthar replied. And enough to know that you've developed weapons and tactics that would horrify most civilized species. We've done what was necessary to survive, Admiral Chen said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. That's exactly why we need you, Ambassador Crix explained. Civilized warfare has rules, limitations, boundaries that prevent excessive damage. The Zephyrians don't recognize those boundaries, neither do you. Admiral Chen considered this for a long moment. If we agree to help, what exactly are you offering in exchange? Technology, Dr. Fees, Nixara said immediately. Medical advances that could extend human lifespan by centuries. Energy sources that could power your civilization for millennia. Transportation systems that could let you travel between stars in days instead of months. And after the war? Admiral Chen pressed. Assuming we survive, what then? Do we become junior members of your galactic council? Do you try to civilize us? Zekthar's mandibles clicked in what humans would learn to recognize as amusement. Admiral, after seeing what you've accomplished with primitive technology, I think the question is whether you'll allow us to become junior members of humanity's empire. The meeting continued for 6 hours, with the humans asking detailed questions about Zephyrian capabilities, galactic politics, and the scope of the threat they faced. Admiral Chen's staff demonstrated an understanding of military strategy that impressed even Ambassador Crix, and their questions revealed a depth of tactical thinking that went far beyond what should have been possible for such a young civilization. One final question, Admiral Chen said as the meeting drew to a close. Why should we trust you? For all we know, this could be an elaborate deception designed to get us to weaken ourselves fighting these Zephyrians. Zekthar had been expecting this question, because, Admiral, if we wanted to conquer humanity, We would have done so decades ago when you were still confined to your own planet. The fact that we're here asking for help instead of demanding surrender should tell you everything you need to know about how desperate our situation has become. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. I need to consult with my government. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Of course, Zek_Thar agreed. But Admiral, please don't take too long. Every day we delay, the Zephyrians grow stronger. As the diplomatic party was escorted back to their ship, Zekthar couldn't shake the feeling that they had just set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. The humans would agree to help. He was certain of that. Their entire psychology compelled them to fight against extinction, and the Zephyrians represented the ultimate threat to individual freedom. But watching the human soldiers, seeing their weapons, observing their tactical thinking, Zekthar began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity was given a reason to fight. He just hoped they would still recognize civilization when the war was over. The next morning, Admiral Chen's response came through official channels. It was brief, direct, and terrifying in its simplicity. Earth Defense Command accepts your proposal. When do we start? 3 weeks after first contact. The Kepler Station construction facility had been transformed into the most heavily fortified shipyard in human space. Admiral Chen stood in the observation deck, watching as human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to retrofit Earth's entire defense fleet with experimental weapon systems. The sight should have been inspiring. Representatives of multiple species working together for their mutual survival. Instead, it filled her with dread. Admiral, the weapon tests are ready for your review, reported Captain Martinez, her aide-de-camp. His usually steady voice carried an undertone of concern that had become common among the human staff since the retrofitting began. Admiral Chen nodded, not taking her eyes off the work below. Have our alien advisors expressed any concerns about the modifications? On the contrary, ma'am. Ambassador Zekthar seems enthusiastic about our innovations. Dr. Nixara called them frighteningly effective. Ambassador Krex has requested detailed schematics to share with the Galactic Council. Admiral Chen finally turned away from the observation window. 3 weeks of constant collaboration with galactic representatives had taught her many things about humanity's place in the universe, none of them particularly comforting. Captain, in your opinion, are we building weapons to fight the Zephyrians, or are we building weapons that happen to be useful against the Zephyrians? Captain Martinez considered the question carefully. I think we're building weapons that reflect who we are as a species, ma'am. The aliens just gave us better materials to work with. The testing facility was located in a heavily shielded section of the asteroid belt, far enough from Earth to prevent collateral damage but close enough for real-time observation. Admiral Chen's shuttle approached the coordinates to find an impressive array of human and alien vessels positioned at strategic distances around the test zone. Incoming transmission from the command ship, reported the shuttle pilot. The main display activated, showing the bridge of the Earth defense ship, Indomitable. Commander Sarah Williams looked up from her tactical station with the kind of fierce grin that had made her both famous and feared throughout the fleet.
Admiral, we're ready to begin the demonstration.
All ships are at minimum safe distance, and our alien observers are, well, they're nervous. Admiral Chen could see why. The Indomitable had been humanity's most powerful warship before the retrofitting. Now it bristled with hybrid weapon systems that combined human engineering principles with alien technology in ways that violated every conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Proceed with Test 1, Admiral Chen ordered. The target was a derelict alien vessel that had been constructed to match Zephyrian specifications. According to galactic intelligence, it should have been able to withstand anything short of a direct antimatter explosion. Admiral Chen watched as the Indomitable aligned its primary weapon system with the target. Firing quantum resonance cannon, Commander Williams announced. The weapon itself was invisible, but its effects were not. The target vessel simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but literally unmade at a quantum level. Where there had been solid matter, there was now empty space, filled with rapidly dissipating energy particles. Jesus Christ, whispered Captain Martinez. We didn't blow it up, we erased it. The quantum resonance principle was Dr. Nixara's contribution, Admiral Chen said quietly. But the weapon design is purely human. We took a theoretical physics concept and turned it into a ship killer. On the communication channel, she could hear excited chatter from the alien observer ships. Ambassador Zekthar's voice cut through the noise. Admiral, that weapon. How did you solve the power requirements? Our calculations indicated that quantum resonance would require the energy output of a small star. Commander Williams answered before Admiral Chen could respond. We didn't solve the power requirements, Ambassador. We cheated. Instead of trying to power the effect continuously, we created a cascade reaction that feeds on the target's own molecular bonds. The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Dr. Nixara's voice came through the channel. You weaponized the target's atomic structure against itself. Basically, yeah, Commander Williams confirmed with obvious pride. The more massive the target, the more powerful the explosion. We turned physics into our ammunition. Admiral Chen decided it was time to move to the next phase of testing. Commander Williams, proceed with Test 2. This time the target was a replica of a Zephyrian biomechanical ship, complete with their adaptive armor and regenerative capabilities. According to intelligence reports, these vessels could repair damage almost as quickly as it was inflicted, making them nearly impossible to destroy through conventional means. Deploying hunter-killer drones, Commander Williams announced. A swarm of small projectiles launched from the Indomitable, each no larger than a baseball but moving at significant fractions of light speed. Unlike conventional missiles, these devices were designed to think, learn, and adapt their behavior based on target responses. The drones are equipped with limited AI, Admiral Chen explained to her alien observers. They're programmed with one primary directive: find a way to kill the target. Everything else is negotiable. The attack was unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. Instead of trying to overwhelm the target's defenses, the drones began probing, testing different attack vectors, learning from each failed attempt. When the biomechanical ship adapted to counter one type of attack, the drones switched tactics. When the ship's armor evolved to resist kinetic damage, they switched to thermal attacks. When thermal attacks were countered, they began using electromagnetic pulses. They're not just attacking randomly, observed Ambassador Crix, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. They're conducting experiments, using the target as a test subject to determine optimal killing methods. That's the idea, Admiral Chen confirmed. Each drone shares information with the others. They learn collectively, but they think individually. It prevents the kind of collective countermeasures that work against hive mind tactics. The test continued for 23 minutes, during which the drone systematically identified and exploited 17 different vulnerabilities in Zephyrian biomechanical design. By the time they finally destroyed the target, they had developed a complete tactical database for fighting similar vessels. The information they gathered will be uploaded to every drone in our arsenal, Commander Williams explained. The next time we encounter Zephyrian biomechanical ships, our weapons will already know how to kill them. Dr. Nixara's voice was barely audible over the communication channel. You've created weapons that evolve, weapons that learn from their victories and become more deadly with each engagement. We've created weapons that think like humans. Admiral Chen corrected. Persistent, adaptable, and absolutely determined to find a way to win. Test 3 involved a different approach entirely. This time, the target was a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a simulation of a Zephyrian command structure. The test was designed to demonstrate humanity's approach to fortress warfare. Deploying penetrator missiles, Commander Williams announced. The missiles were larger than the hunter-killer drones, each one designed to burrow through solid rock and metal before detonating. But these weren't conventional explosives. They were cluster weapons, each one containing dozens of smaller warheads programmed with different objectives. The penetrator missiles will create multiple entry points, Admiral Chen explained. Then the secondary payloads will deploy inside the structure. Some are designed to disrupt electronics, others to eliminate organic targets, still others to destroy structural supports. You're not trying to destroy the facility, Ambassador Crix observed. You're trying to capture it intact. Negative, Admiral Chen replied. We're trying to make its destruction as painful and terrifying as possible for anyone inside. The psychological impact is as important as the tactical one. The attack proceeded with mechanical precision. The penetrator missiles burrowed into the asteroid at dozens of points, creating a network of tunnels throughout its structure. Then the secondary payloads activated, and the asteroid became a maze of death. Explosive charges detonated in sequence, collapsing passages and trapping defenders in isolated sections. Nerve gas canisters released toxins that would incapacitate Zephyrian drones while preserving their cybernetic components for analysis. Electromagnetic pulse weapons disabled electronics without destroying them, allowing for intelligence gathering. The idea is to make surrender more attractive than resistance, Admiral Chen explained as they watched the systematic destruction unfold. If the enemy knows that capture means prolonged suffering while surrender means quick death, they're more likely to give up valuable information.
You're describing psychological warfare, Dr. Nixara said, her voice hollow with shock.
We're describing effective warfare, Admiral Chen corrected. The Zephyrians don't feel fear the way biological species do, but they can still calculate odds and make rational decisions. If we make resistance costly enough, even a collective consciousness will eventually choose the path of least damage. The final test was the one Admiral Chen had been dreading. Test 4 was designed to demonstrate humanity's ultimate contingency plan, what military planners called the Dead Man's Switch Protocol. For this demonstration, we're going to assume that all conventional resistance has failed, Admiral Chen announced. The enemy has broken through our defenses, occupied our territory, and begun the assimilation process. This is our response when we have nothing left to lose. The target this time was an entire mock solar system, complete with planets, space stations, and defensive installations. It represented the kind of strategic prize that the Zephyrians would prioritize for conquest and assimilation. Deploying Stellar Ignition Device, Commander Williams said, her voice unusually subdued. The device itself was small, barely larger than a shuttle, but its purpose was unmistakable. It was designed to destabilize a star's fusion process, turning it into a nova that would sterilize everything within several light years. You would destroy your own solar system rather than let it be captured, Ambassador Zekthar said. It wasn't a question. We would destroy everything the enemy hoped to gain, Admiral Chen confirmed. Every resource, every piece of technology, every potential asset. If they want our territory, they can have it as radioactive ash. The Stellar Ignition Device approached the target star and began its work. The process took several hours, during which the star's output gradually increased beyond sustainable levels. When the end came, it was spectacular, a blast of energy that vaporized planets and bathed the entire system in lethal radiation. The beauty of this approach, Admiral Chen continued with clinical detachment, is that it denies the enemy everything they were trying to accomplish. They can't assimilate dead worlds. They can't harvest resources from radioactive debris. They can't use our technology if it's been vaporized. The alien observers were completely silent. Admiral Chen suspected they were beginning to understand what they had unleashed by asking for humanity's help. Admiral, Dr. Nixara finally spoke, her voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. What you've demonstrated today, these aren't just weapons. These are instruments of total warfare. Weapons designed not just to defeat an enemy, but to make victory Pyrrhic for anyone who opposes you. That's the point, Admiral Chen replied simply. We don't just want to win the war against the Zephyrians. We want to make sure that any future species that considers attacking humanity will think very carefully about whether they can afford the victory.
Ambassador Zekthar's mandibles clicked nervously.
Admiral, I must ask, if another species were to threaten humanity in the future, would you use these same weapons against them? Admiral Chen considered the question for a moment. Ambassador, that depends entirely on whether they give us a choice. We're not conquerors, we don't start wars. But when someone threatens our survival, she paused, looking out at the dissipating remains of the test solar system, we finish them. The return journey to Earth was unusually quiet. The alien representatives spent most of the trip huddled together in urgent conversation, clearly struggling to process what they had witnessed. Admiral Chen used the time to review the test data and prepare her report for the Global Defense Council. Admiral, Captain Martinez said as Earth came into view, do you think we've convinced them that we can defeat the Zephyrians? Admiral Chen studied the blue-green world that had given birth to humanity's unique approach to warfare. Captain, I think we've convinced them that the Zephyrians are the least of the galaxy's problems. I think we've just shown them what a species looks like when it's been shaped by 4 billion years of evolution on a planet where everything wants to kill everything else. The communication channel activated, and Ambassador Zekthar's image appeared on the main screen. His usual composure was nowhere to be seen. Admiral, my government has instructed me to ask about humanity's post-war intentions. Specifically, they want to know if Earth plans to expand its territory after the Zephyrian threat is eliminated. Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ambassador, humanity has no interest in ruling other species. We prefer that others remain free to make their own choices. But we will not tolerate threats to human survival, and we will not hesitate to eliminate any species that proves hostile to human interests. And how do you define hostile to human interests? Ambassador Zekthar asked carefully. Simple, Admiral Chen replied. Don't attack us, don't threaten us, and don't try to limit our freedom to explore and expand. Follow those rules, and we'll all get along fine. Break them. She gestured toward the tactical display still showing the test results, and you'll discover why the Zephyrians are about to become extinct. The communication ended, leaving the human crew alone on the bridge. Captain Martinez shook his head slowly. Ma'am, I think we just became the most feared species in the galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded. Good. Fear prevents wars. And after what we've been through to reach the stars, Captain, I think humanity has earned the right to be feared. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Admiral Chen wondered if they had just saved galactic civilization or condemned it. The weapons they had demonstrated were indeed capable of defeating the Zephyrians, but they were also capable of much more. Humanity had revealed itself to be the ultimate apex predator, a species that turned warfare into art and victory into inevitability. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called the most dangerous species. Admiral Chen just hoped that when the war was over, there would still be someone left to remember why that reputation was earned. 2 days later, the first reports came in from the frontier worlds. The Zephyrian advance had suddenly stalled, then began a strategic withdrawal toward the galactic rim. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures consistent with internal warfare within the collective. They're fighting each other? Ambassador Crix asked during the emergency briefing. They've analyzed our weapons demonstrations, Admiral Chen explained with grim satisfaction. The collective consciousness has calculated the cost of victory against humanity and decided it's unacceptable. They're withdrawing to defensive positions. The different elements of the collective disagree on strategy. It's tearing them apart from the inside. Dr. Nixara looked stunned. You defeated them without firing a shot. They're so afraid of fighting humanity that they're destroying themselves. Fear is our most effective weapon, Admiral Chen agreed. And we've just demonstrated to the entire galaxy that some enemies are too dangerous to fight. The Zephyrians learned that lesson. I hope other species will remember it. The war was over before it truly began. But as Admiral Chen watched the reports of Zephyrian self-destruction, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had won something far more dangerous than victory. They had won the respect and terror of an entire galaxy. Now they would have to live with the consequences of being exactly what everyone feared they were, the most dangerous species in known space.